It's chattering. It's driving me mad.
Yeah, we're coming to you on a Monday after Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
So the seasonal spookiness has already had its great hurrah. But
It has.
But here we are on Directorpiece Theater, like the guy said. I'm one of your hosts, and I'm going to take this episode's thesis, I guess. My name is Abe Epperson. I'm here with my co-host, who is amazing director. Say your name.
Adam Ganser. Thank you. Wow, that was very... I love the pontificator. Really liked it.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about Sam Raimi today with you.
I am too. It's crazy to me that it took us this long to land on a Raimi film.
He's perfect for this podcast.
Yes. Sam, we were just saying that before we started recording. Sam Raimi is like exactly in the wheelhouse of what this podcast should be, which is a topic that we spend almost as much discussing as all of our theories.
Oh, yeah.
What should we do? What should this podcast be? Let's do a whole series on that.
Podcast, what art thou? Yeah, this one we're doing Drag Me to Hell. And hot take, I put this above or at least on the same level as The Quick and the Dead and Darkman. I think it's it might be his best film. Depending on what you're looking for.
Comfortable with that. I like Quick and the Dead a little better than this, but I could argue that this is a better movie.
Mm-hmm. I love that it doesn't. This movie doesn't take itself seriously as much as those other two, and I think that that's a nice little nook for Sam Raimi to call his home. Yeah,
I don't think he's ever made a movie that took itself that seriously.
Took it like what? Darkman.
It's been a long time since I've seen Darkman.
I mean, he does have comic bends, but
for sure.
Quick and the Dead is played pretty straightforward.
Yeah,
there's not really. You get Leo
is.
going like, "Oh, how am I this good?" It's like there's moments where you kind of like smile with glee, but it's not like he's actually going full on Evil Dead 2.
No, he's not. He's not making a parody or making a comedy send up of his movie,
right?
But like even Quick and the Dead is at its most serious a sort of winking Tarantino film, right? Like that. Like to me, that's as serious as he gets.
Yes.
Okay.
I would say that is correct.
Yeah.
So today, there's going to be kind of two parts to my thought that you'll join me with. First, how does this work? How does this film work directorially? Like, what makes Sam Raimi? What tactics does he use to try to horrify you? And what is the story trying to do? This kind of leads into the second bit, which is let's itemize that and turn that into what does Raimi do in a horror sequence? Hopefully by the end of this, you'll notice Raimi's footprint in like other films and how one could recreate a horror sequence of your own a la Raimi.
Right. And that's really sort of why I think everybody who is a filmmaker has a kind of love spot for Raimi, is that like he sort of represents the promise of being an indie filmmaker.
Yeah.
Right, like it's just like he's just a guy who made a movie, and look at everything he's done.
Yeah.
He made Spider-Man.
And he's got all these weird quirks, like he involves his car in all of his movies, and he has a thing called a Raimi board.
Right, of course.
There's all these things that you just go, Raimi, look at you. You were you were a roommate with what was it, Joel Cohen of the Coen Brothers fame. That's so cute.
Is that true?
Yeah, they.
Oh my God, that's
they knew
so
each
crazy.
other. They grew up together. I think in Michigan. I think they grew up in Michigan. And then
I did not
they
know
went
that.
to NYU. I can't remember if they met at NYU or whatever, but they were roommates. And Raimi was the one who told, if I'm correct, the story goes, Raimi was the one who told the Coen brothers, you know what's a really smart tactic for you to do is film a trailer for Blood Simple and then go to dentists and just show them the trailer with like bring a reel-to-reel and just play it for them and then get money that way. And that's what they did. And they raised like almost $1 million. And that's the start of the Coen brothers' career.
God.
So off of the advice of Sam Raimi, we may or may not have had Coen brothers. One could argue. I mean, I don't know.
Wow.
But
that could be us. Abe, this could be us. This could be our origin story.
Joel Cohen was, I believe, assistant editor on Evil Dead.
Wow. How did this fact never hit me before now?
I don't know, man.
Wow.
It's because I'm got a huge heart on for the Coens.
Yeah, you got a Raimi rod. I know. And a Cohen boner.
Yeah, Cohen boner.
And a Raimi rod.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah. Raimi rod.
Yeah.
All right. So I want. Should I begin?
Daddy? Oh, please.
Daddy,
Please.
So let's talk about themes and characters. Just get it out of the way. Most of my favorite films, personally, tell a story that like exemplifies a basic thought, experiment, or a theme. It's usually done via parable. There's reasons why I like that, but I won't go into it. Now, it can be questioning the purpose of something, tell us that there's proof of something, or that something doesn't even exist and it's all made up or something like that. I think that's it, actually. Those are all the stories, but don't quote me on that. The basic theme of Drag Me to Hell, to me, is justice. Namely, that its results in this world are unavoidable.
Yeah.
Raimi has, so if you haven't watched the movie recently, Raimi has an old, poor European woman referenced in this movie, problematically as a gypsy, cursed our protagonist, Christine, a loan officer, because she's denied a bank loan. Specifically, Mrs. Ganush, the name of the European woman, begs her to help her, which once she's denied, she feels shamed. So in turn, she vows to exact justice and have Christine beg at her feet, as she says, calling upon the demon Lamia. And then the rest of the movie is basically a 3-day haunt as the promise of damning Christine's soul immediately after that. So Act 2 and 3 also provide a series of circumstances that, were it to play out without them, Christine might actually avoid damnation and dying. But Mrs. Ganush dies, a seance fails, an envelope meant to dispel the curse is accidentally switched out by Christine's boyfriend, Justin Long. So ultimately, she is dragged to hell.
So can I ask a quick question? Are you suggesting that there was a version of this story somewhere in the cosmos where this wouldn't have played out this way?
I think what Sam Raimi is doing with this story is saying, if this one thing didn't happen, and if these 3 things didn't happen, they could have avoided it. People have avoided Lamia before because there's rituals. You can sometimes kill a cat or kill a small animal, or sometimes you can, do it, and they all fail. And so I do believe that if like the seance worked, maybe she wouldn't die, right?
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I found this movie to be kind of fatalistic. But I don't want to derail your point.
No, I think that's right. I think that what it's saying is that it's either Final Destination where, she's destined to go to hell, or it's just like a series of, he's not making a comment on that. Its results are unavoidable in this movie because of the procession of events, but those events weren't necessarily always to damn her. She tried very hard to not be dragged. That's why it's drag me to hell, not I'm taking you to hell. You're fucked. Let's go to hell.
Right. It does feel sort of like the Odyssey, the Oedipus myth, right? Where it's sort of like he goes out of his way to try to stop his fate from happening, and then of course ends up causing it. It feels like that to me.
Exactly. I think that there's a very specific and system of justice here, because we see the battle of heaven and hell, which implies a promise of like an infallible system of deeds determining your position in the afterlife, right? So if killing a kitten doesn't thwart the Lamia, if our demon slayers have a ritualistic sacrifice, or they can find loopholes like re-gifting to the dead at one point at the end of the film, the kind of seer is like, yeah, actually that would work. If you gave it back to the dead woman who cursed you, it's technically you're giving a gift, and her soul would be damned and you wouldn't. It's a loophole, but it's technically, we're working off the writ, and we kind of think that there's a power behind the writ. That's kind of the implication of ritualism and the implication of heaven and hell, and all this long-standing documentation of demons, coming into the world. So there's this weird system at play that we're slowly mining and learning more about, and learning that there are loopholes.
Yeah, it was sort of like a mix of things. You know what I mean? Because like it was like a mix of like astrology and like that sort of like Grecian pantheon kind of hell, mixed with like a traditional Judeo-Christian understanding of heaven and hell. Like there were sort of pieces of each of them. You know, which I mentioned because I do think that in the film we're trying to like get our bearings about sort of how does it work a lot, right? And he's constantly sort of educating us about how does it work. Is that how you experienced it?
Yeah, I think that it's kind of like what you were saying before to me, where there is this approach that it's almost like she's always gonna go to hell.
Yes.
I think
that's what I thought.
That's what he's revealing. I don't think we're supposed to think that, and that's part of the story. That's part of the reveal. Is that he is probably saying that, but he's doing it by giving us red herrings all the time.
Yes, I think I love that interpretation. I think that totally fits the movie. Just briefly, one last question. I'm sorry. When you watched this movie, did you know the ending?
Did I anticipate the ending?
No. Did you walk into the movie not knowing the ending?
Oh yes, I didn't know the ending.
Okay.
I watched it in theaters. So
okay, great. Yeah, I did not. I had seen the ending before.
You had seen the ending, so you knew she was.
I did. Yeah, and I think it might have colored my viewing a little bit.
One of my favorite type of endings of a movie.
Fantastic ending.
You know, it's like a whiplash. You know, like
yeah.
It's like, and the thing is done, and cut to credits right in your face, drag me to hell. Real cool. Let's talk a little bit about character just to get out of the way. Christine denies her, which is kind of like the justice thing. It's the effort that you need to put in to make the script the thing, because really we know that the haunt and the gore are the thing. It's a Raimi show, and it's specifically a toss back to Evil Dead. So let's cut to the chase. In like fashion, I'll describe it quickly. Christine is this kind of denier. She lives in the city now, and she denies her humble kind of farm hick past. There's a photo of her, and she's a little pudgy, and it's implied that it's like when she's a teen, and she was like Pork Queen?
My God.
Yeah,
My
it's like,
God.
So she's this farm hick, and she has attuned her image to the palette of the city. And therefore, in justice, we need to talk about checks and balances, kind of how she's a banker. Ambition is her sin. She appears to have a good heart to others. However, she basically is kind of selfless in some walks of life. She adopts cats. She's a vegetarian. She's a supporting partner and lover. But when it comes to Mrs. Ganoush, she admits later in the film that she didn't need to deny her loan. She just does it in order to curry favor with the boss and get a leg up on the promotion to assistant manager that she and Stu, her competition, are going for. So that's her sin, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that he also tries to kind of reinforce it by every time she's under some like real duress, like under real pressure, she kind of does lose her shit. You know what I mean? Like that's like the one thing you see sort of over and over. She's
not good at it, but I don't think that's a part of the system, because like I think that's just a choice that Sam Raimi made to make things a little bit more scary.
Yeah, I think you're right about that too. I was trying to make sense of that, but I think you're right.
Here's the thing: Raimi is doing a very fundamental slasher, old style horror trope thing here. In typical Raimi fashion, this is like her ambition is her sin is a huge statement, right? For a movie. The reason why is that if this was like an Alex Garland movie, the movie would be about the terror of ambition.
Right.
And what makes ambition haunt you. That's not what Raimi does. This is not the heart of the terror. Ambition is just an excuse for why the events happen. Rather, for Raimi, and I think why people like Raimi, and, you know, tell me if I'm wrong, anybody, but I think it's because the craftsman approach he takes with this impressive gore, special and visual effects, and just a steady reliance on his unique camera and editing approach make his films fun to watch.
Yeah,
it's kind of the argument for all gore movies or horror movies in the end, at least in this classic approach. And Raimi's, that's what he does. He doesn't really change it up.
Yeah, he's one of the most fun filmmakers consistently that we see movies from. And I think he's kind of defined a whole generation of movie watchers' sensibility about horror, but also just movies. Where like I think a whole generation of people sort of like have that kind of like, man, just pop some popcorn and have a good like lay back and let it happen to you kind of vibe about movies. I think he's really at the forefront of that.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that's why I took this. That's why I took this thought experiment here, this podcast, to be like, I'm gonna give like everyone who's listening to this right now, they've seen a Raimi horror film because it's so, ubiquitous, and also I want to talk about a little bit more of what's going on behind that. Like, I want to talk about the sequences and the shot selections and the tactics he's using, and why do we remember Raimi? So let's take a look at the basement parking lot scene. If you remember this is the initial attack of Ganush on Christine when she steals her button and starts the curse off. For how simple it is, it's like really effective. And it's like, this movie, why I choose this movie is that there's a lot of rough edges around Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness. And then he went and had a Spider-Man. And then he came back to this and he really shows the polish of the Spider-Mans. And I think that's why almost every sequence in this scene is super memorable for one reason or another. Usually because it's outrageous, because that's what Raimi does with horror. But when you watch this sequence next, the basement parking lot scene, next time you're popping in, drag me, and, crushing some popcorn, think about a few things you'll notice. You'll notice that there's not like... It's not that flashy. It's brutal. There's like the stabbing into the mouth with the ruler. So it's like kind of funny and memorable, but it's not flashy in a lot of ways that I'll separate a little bit later. I just want to examine this one sequence to show like at its base level what makes a Raimi sequence. And it's not really in camera editing, though both like that's not what I mean by flash. Like, it's not like flashy camera. It's not crazy shots or like, oh, that editing is so like interesting. It doesn't announce itself. The filmmaker is not announcing himself. It's transparent, but camera and editing are so important in order to make these things possible. So when I say simple, I mean most of Raimi's suspense is designed like most horror sequences in that there's a lengthier section of suspense building up front. And then when the quote-unquote scare happens, it then alters the editorial and camera choices of the movie. And in this case, it's done very simply by just speeding up the cuts. Yeah. So that's one thing. Another thing I wanted to look at is, so when we look at the handkerchief riding the wind and coming at Christine's car, aka the lengthier section of suspense building up front, it's always an insert. It's a cut to, it's an insert of something happening, cut to a medium close-up or a close-up of Christine watching. It follows a simple rule, and we do a full 180 slowly around the car of her watching, tilting her head, looking at the handkerchief as it blows in the wind, and then allows which allows the handkerchief to kind of go entirely behind the car, which at that point does a very Raimi thing that he does all the time, which is now that handkerchief insert has now turned into a pan, and now it's a reveal shot. Ganush is in the back seat. This is Raimi's understanding of suspense. It's a shot of a person, to take it out of, just in the realm of like, I don't know, hypothetical. It's a shot of a person looking outside of a window with a pensive expression on their face, cutting to something spooky outside. And then the beastie gets slowly closer, but we use just those two shots, ping pong, for however long it's needed until we reveal a scare. And then we have a different editorial and camera choice. Does this make sense all up front?
Yeah, totally. I mean, like, one thing I thought was interesting about the scares in this movie that is kind of consistent with him is, like, they don't relieve tension that much. Mm-hmm. Most horror movies, when you get a scare, then it, like, the tension
there's the false
drops.
Yeah,
until you're in the third act. Yeah. Right, until you're in the third act. With Raimi, his scares are a lot more sort of the expression of dread.
Yeah.
Like there's dread that's growing. And
oh fuck, something's coming, and it does. It always comes.
It does, and then but you don't feel like you don't feel like it's done. You just feel like it's going to happen to you, sort of at a few times, and also you don't know when it's going to happen in a good way.
Yeah. So then the scare happens.
Right.
And here's the cool thing about Raimi, I think. The more I look into filmmakers and how they're... Like, this is an important moment. This is a moment that, like, Hitchcock's in that conversation. Any horror director, anyone who's trying to give you fear is going to have to play the suspense versus surprise game. And what's interesting about Raimi is he has a sneaky, simple solution to this, which is kind of what I said before, which... all that really happens, there is one element of complexity that occurs, but it really is just speeding up the cuts. Because when Ganush attacks from the back seat, all it does is now, instead of an insert and a close-up on Christine, it now does the same ping-pong game between Ganush and Christine's face and their torsos as they grapple. It's doing the same thing as the suspense. It's just now faster. Now, there's one element of complexity that, he's really good at, which is often camera will simply pan or tilt in order to follow the action. Like, for example, when Christine is trying to get out of the situation, her hand may go for the stick shift to switch gears, to go into reverse and then go forward. An insert of a foot hitting a gas pedal, a hand grabbing a ruler. These inserts that kind of propel us forward to like, okay, so now that's this part of the choreography, the next part of the dance. He does break the format of shot, suspense building. Okay, a little quicker now. Okay, now things are happening. Like, these are all basic sequence stuff, but ultimately he's doing the same thing. Another thing is, if Raimi wants to maintain the speed of the sequence, there's sometimes he doesn't use pans and tilts, like to the ruler or to the stick shift. Sometimes he simply cuts, because I think that that's just something you do when you want the speed to maintain. So often Raimi will cover the same action, but in order to speed it up, he covers the same action with slightly different angles. In other words, he'll get a shot of like, for example, when Ganush gums Christine's chin with her whole mouth.
My God.
It starts off in profile, and then it goes to a 3/4, and then it goes to a back 3/4. So he's kind of, even though she's just gnawing on her chin, to ramp the, like, oh my God, to that beat of the sequence, he will manufacture the speed in editing by having more coverage. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. I think also, like, this is a good moment to just briefly add, I don't know of anybody that's better at gross out horror than Raimi.
Yeah, he plays a line, because it's not about gore for like, oh, that's cool. Sometimes it is, because he does a straight up quote to Deadites in this movie when, like, during the seance, the random dude is all of a sudden dancing and like has the Deadite makeup.
That was fascinating. Yeah,
It's all because he, like, and it's the same thing with the ruler. Like, it's supposed to be Looney Tunes,
right? That I think he's very like his horror movies are very gleeful.
Yeah,
like they're fun. You know what I mean? Like, and he's making, like, that's so rare in horror movies. They're usually like sort of brittle, and like they're played for this sort of sorrow, sort of drained feeling. A lot of them. Yeah, and his are very vibrant. Like I think at some point you're going to talk about Edgar Wright, right? You can talk briefly about, okay, yeah, I don't want to get it. Then I don't want to get too ahead. The only just last thing I want to add is, yeah, Raimi's not a gore guy, but he is a gross out guy.
He definitely is in this movie, and I think Evil Dead to a big extent. Yeah,
like I was thinking. I mean, I'm not a horror aficionado.
He likes blood again. He likes blood splashing in their mouths and stuff.
Yeah, in the mouth. Ugh, like
he loves mouth stuff.
Yeah,
Raimi loves mouth stuff.
He's got an oral thing for
sure. You
sure.
heard it here first.
Yeah, but like, but grossed out, like vomiting all over somebody or like bugs in your mouth, like that kind of stuff. Like, that is a legitimate source of like dread and tension, and nobody's better at it than him.
Yes.
That I can think of, like, offhand. I'm sure somebody's gonna be like, actually, and then send me a long email. Fine, but offhand, Raimi's pretty good. Yeah,
and I think I'm glad you pointed that out, because it's like what I'm if you haven't caught it yet, I'm kind of building this like, okay, there's simplicity in the design.
Yeah.
It's because his transparency of design work, and when I say the word transparency, usually when I'm talking about filmmaking, I mean it to say the filmmaker's trying not to make you notice that you're watching a film. You know, for example, in, I don't know, Pulp Fiction or Reservoir Dogs, when they're all walking at camera and it's like, oh, fuck, look how cool this shit is.
Right.
You know, you notice your scene, you notice the medium in that moment.
Yep.
You look at it and you go, this is cool, this is Tarantino.
Right.
Transparency would be the opposite of that.
Well, it's funny because like this is gonna forever be a companion of Drive. Like we did a direct
which
piece
you're going to
about
cover next, yeah.
Yeah, we did one about Drive, and that's literally the opposite of transparency according to your
Yeah,
definition.
exactly. That's why it's funny that these two will go up next to each other in terms of time. But all I mean to say is because he's such a horror director, like all of the things that you're saying about like he's grossing you out, you know, it's the ruler, it's the entire arm in the mouth, it's the
God.
ruler in the mouth, it's vomiting like fluid into her mouth. It's always mouth stuff.
Dude, that gumming thing, like in Ganush, like that was fucked. That's really
straight up fucked.
Yeah.
But it's because he's like the offer is so big and so loud that Raimi in that moment is not going to be like relish in it. He's going to just treat it like normal. And that's kind of the power of Raimi, that he in transparency, that he's not always transparent. I'm going to go into in just a second what makes like a Raimi shot.
Yeah.
But his approach ad hoc is almost always this kind of simple, dynamic kind of editorial strategy that I was talking about. And I think that there's something there about the simplicity of that offer, the transparency of that offer, and then putting in that kind of scaffolding, outrageous, beats of story. Like
he definitely doesn't make sexy shots. Like you really don't think about his shots much, with the exception of the one I know you're going to talk about. And also, you mentioned that 180 shot. I think that one also, like where you kind of pan around, that was the only shot until the one you're going to talk about that felt like flashy. For the most part, he's like a stylish but simple storyteller, right? I mean, he's not transparent like Jim Jarmusch, where it's like just set the camera on a tripod and let the scene happen.
Yeah.
Like Jarmusch is like that, and that to me is
nor is he Tarantino, who's like, what's the coolest way I can do this scene?
I gotta get the right film stuck so it feels like that 70s commercial I used to watch.
It's Hateful Eight. How long can I stay in the shot before people are gonna be like, cut, please?
Yeah, I also didn't care for his Hollywood movie that much for that reason either, so he's definitely not drawing attention to a shot. Like even Spielberg, I think, who does a pretty good job of getting out of the way, still has very memorable shots, like pretty frequently in his movie.
I think there's a reason for this too. I don't want to put the cart before the horse, because this is kind of what you don't remember Raimi shots. You remember Raimi techniques.
Yeah, that's right. I agree with that.
And I mean, look no further than the Raimi board.
The Raimi board,
which
famous.
I don't know. I think most people know. Everyone in film school knows about the Raimi board, but for people who may or may not know about it, just a quick. Here's what a Raimi board is. So imagine you're, like a Michigan, film student. And you have no money and you have a camera and they gave you a camera and you're shooting out, it's called Evil Dead, and you're out shooting at a cabin, and it's really hard in the forest to like put down dolly track because you need a lot of people, and you don't really have a lot of people. You have like 5-6 people. So what do? Well, here's a good way to make a stabilized kind of system here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a piece of cardboard or a piece of usually I think it was like plywood. And I'm just going to put the camera on it. I'm not even going to seat it on a tripod or like rig it, or maybe they put like a ratchet strap around it so it wouldn't fall over because it's an expensive thing, but whatever. And then we're going to take 2 people and they're just going to run. And so anytime in Evil Dead especially, you're going to notice that like when it feels like the sped up shots of like the demon running at the tree or the demon running at the cabin, they feel sped up because that is 2 people holding a plywood board with camera strapped on it, kind of moving pretty slowly so they're not like
jarring the camera.
Jittery. Yeah, and then they just speed it up to the speed that they want in post. This is a Raimi board. It's like the simplest. It's like a Steadicam that has like one function, which is to just shoot forward. and they didn't have money, so they just used a piece of wood.
Like I feel
and it's
like
kind of brilliant.
I feel like Sam Raimi is sort of in some ways like a slightly less flashy Robert Rodriguez. Like they're sort of like kindred spirits in a way. Because Robert Rodriguez
low budget filmmakers out of necessity.
Yeah, Robert Rodriguez has also done sort of a lot of these like clever sort of DIY film techniques for years and years, even when he had money, and like Raimi's still doing that, but like Robert Rodriguez has done it to make a stylish feeling for his films, and Raimi is a little bit more like no, I'm gonna make style just by the choices I make to tell the story, but otherwise I'm gonna get out of the way and like let's have a good time, and like Robert Rodriguez doesn't want to just have a good time, he wants to like have some flourish. Right? I think we can agree with that.
I think, whether it's built out of necessity, definitely by now in Dragging Me to Hell, he's now quoting himself. I think he's right. He likes it. He likes it,
He
I think
could make
if
any
he was a film
movie.
student and they were like, would you want a Steadicam or a Raimi board? The thing you invented to work as a Steadicam. As a film student, he would probably have been, I would like the Steadicam, please.
Right, of course.
He didn't. And surprisingly, that added a lot to his veneer as a director. It's kind of like, oh yeah, Raimi. I know that shot. It looks like a Raimi thing, and that's kind of what I was talking about. And when we're talking about the flash of a director, I want to look at another Drag Me sequence, which is the shed scene, which I think shares tactics with the original shed scene in Evil Dead.
That's fun.
Or the Evil Dead shed scenes, if you recall.
Yeah.
Or just Evil Dead in general, because of the Raimi board stuff. But one tactic in particular is when Ganush has her entire arm down Christian's mouth. And this is a dream. It's a haunt, but it's like she thinks it's real. Her entire arm is in Christine's open mouth, and she's pinned against a pillar. And then it's a close-up shot of her looking around the room for a way out. So it intercuts with her eyes darting around to a compound shot, but it only breaks it up like once or twice. And the shot goes the following. It whip pans to a tied off rope, like the standing end of a secured to a pillar in the room. Right? Like standing end.
Yep.
That's like a nautical thing. Yeah. And then it follows up the line rope to a pulley that shows that the rope probably has a counterweight. And then it booms down to an anvil. Once again, Looney Tunes.
Right. This was the funniest thing in the film, I thought. Like that was a really funny shot.
Yeah, it's fucking great.
Yeah, it's
straight up
great.
Wile E. Coyote, man. It's essentially revealing the length and breadth of a Rube Goldberg machine that she will use to get out of the attack. But it's the style, the speed, and the character of the camera. If that could be I wish that we had a term for that. Like the color of the character, or the color of the camera, or the character of the camera. It makes it feel so emphatically Raimi. And that's what I mean when I say Raimi, you remember tactics. Do you remember in the sequence in Evil Dead when Ash goes crazy? I think it's Evil Dead 2. And he looks around the living room and sees a series of objects, a lamp, a mounted head of a deer, and they come to life and they laugh at him. Do you remember how the camera doesn't just pan around? It like uproots itself. It moves and kind of rigidly positions itself so it's got these central framed objects very close to the insert of the subject. And sometimes he touches the frame, but really not that often. You know that sequence I'm talking about?
Yes. It's been a very long time, but yes, I remember it.
It's kind of cool because he actually in that film, if I recall, he puts the sounds that we put, like the Foley that people use for when necks break. He does that with the mounted head of the deer. He also kind of puts a subtle one in the shots themselves, as if the camera itself is breaking its neck in order to capture the shot.
Yeah, it's almost like he definitely
does
gives
stuff like that.
He gives the camera a sense of identity. Right, which is what you were saying just before, like that shot that you just described of like looking up to the anvil.
Right.
Definitely. I mean, it's a point of view shot, but also it's like it's the equivalent of like a dancing skeleton for a shot. You know what I mean? It's very like it's very. It feels like a different person than the point of view who it's from. Right.
Another reason for that, I think, is because the way that they shoot those shots too, much like the Raimi board, they shoot it slowly. And then they speed it up 2 to 3 times in post. He does it even though it was done out of necessity, as I said, in Raimi's early career, but now he shoots for that. He's gotten a ton of technology and money behind him after the Spider-Mans, and he's still doing that look. It's a choice. I think it recalls his early work, and it feels, he's like, that's me. That's how I'm off-putting. I'm going to re-quote that. Right? Because you could do the same, like if you had a Chapman or a Technocrane.
Right, yeah, right.
You could do that shot and make it way smoother and do it real time, right? You could do it with the speed that he intended, because they could be like, all right, boom up to that, all right, quickly drop down to that. He could do these things with the right tools. That's what the technology's for. He's choosing not to. He's saying, no, I'm just going to do it with a tripod and maybe a jib arm, but I'm going to shoot it slow and speed it up in post. Why? Because that looks, you notice, even though if you don't notice it, it has a different, like, the frame feels different. The frame rate isn't different, but it's just like it's a, I forget what they call it, but it's just the combination of the fast speed the speeding up of the frames,
the ramping. I think it's also like an endearing thing. For instance, I think it's great that you're cute.
Yeah,
I think it's great that you're noting that that Raimi could be making much more sophisticated camera moves if he wanted to, but like it wasn't just that he didn't have money that made him decide what he was doing way back when in Evil Dead. It was also who he is. Like Evil Dead is still him. Like that's still what he wanted to do. And now that he has money, he's not quoting himself because of the brand. He's quoting himself because it's what he loves. Like, and I think like we see that in movies a lot, right? Like Tarantino is probably the best example of this. Like, how many times have you seen one of those ridiculous zooms in his movie where the zoom is not that good? Mm-hmm. You know, and like it's intentionally not that good because that's the cinema he grew up watching, was like less professional looking stuff. And so he goes out of his way to get that sort of whoosh zoom where the camera kind of repositions slightly. Because that feels like his old movies, and we laugh at it and feel like, yeah, what a movie. Because like we know he's doing it on purpose, and I think Raimi's the same way. Like we know he's doing it on purpose. You know, like he does. So that's like the one way he does wink at us, right?
Right.
It's like,
I remember. No, you're absolutely right, because like I think that's what it is to be a filmmaker and grow up with to grow up with taste, a certain taste. I remember when I was shooting Agents of Cracked and what was king at the time was Office documentary, right? The Offices,
yes,
and such.
Yeah, your standard mockumentaries, right?
Mockumentary style, yeah. And so I found myself turning off the sound to like an episode editor scene, and just watching how the camera moved, like when it would zoom, when it would tilt, when it would adjust, like moments that the editor had decided to include in the final cut of the thing because of some element of charm of quote unquote documentaryism, you know, like, that's so documentary. And I learned to mimic those forms. And there's a performative aspect of camera. So when I say character of camera, sometimes I mean that. Sometimes you see and witness a certain thing like you're talking about with the bumps and the zooms. And you go, there's some beauty to that. And I think that's what Sam Raimi's doing here. I think you're absolutely right.
Well, I mean, I'm so glad you were willing to talk about your piece because, like, I mean, for those of you who need to know this, and that's all of you, Abe is one of the best comedy zoom guys I've ever seen. Like he's not. I'm serious. I say this in classrooms. It's not a joke. Like Abe is naturally gifted at that, and it's interesting to think that you did it because you wanted to seem current. Because on another whole level, it's like, yeah, it was current, but then like you go back and watch all of your work, and it was you never got the Office feeling. Never. Like, did you use their techniques? Sure, but you were always much more aggressive and creative with that zoom than a sitcom has been, because that's
Thanks,
what you
man.
like.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
I just because you can't just do a thing. You have to redo it. You have to reimagine it. If you're quoting a genre, don't just make another version. Make a new version.
Right.
I don't know.
Like I would say, like for instance, Arrested Development also is shot with that sort of single
Yeah,
cam
it was mainly
style.
Arrested
But
Development.
like Arrested Development is not aggressive in its camera stylings.
No, it isn't.
Not really. It's sometimes it does add things from time to time, but like for the most part, the camera is just sort of reinforcing the writing, and
It's
like,
energy, man. It's so funny to me because as soon as you said Arrested Development, it made me laugh because Arrested Development does that kind of stuff too, where it thinks about like no one thinks about the formation of like a zoom joke. There's no zooming joke, but like there's shit that does it where it's like, okay, this camera's like really the energy is spastic and like zooming in and like where am I looking and stuff like that, and you get that, and then it slows down like it's found a calm, and then it slowly like introduces a little zoom, like, can I zoom again?
Yes, it's so
like,
good.
It's that is reliant on time building the character of a camera, which no one would ever in their right mind look for and go like, oh, that's what they're doing. But I did that kind of shit because I had nothing else to do, I guess. I don't know.
I think it's you're a filmmaker. You know what I mean? Like you and I have always had this argument throughout the history of time, I'm sure, where like you value transparency, meaning like don't let the filmmaking get in the way of the story, which is a thing I think every filmmaker should admire.
Yeah.
But I've always really been more passionate about sure, but also like use the tool to enhance the story. You know what I mean? Even if that means flashy, sometimes it does mean flashy.
Sometimes it does.
Yeah, and like,
right.
and the irony of it is, I would say, like, in some ways, your comedy stuff that's meant to be imitating of those mockumentaries is actually more flashy because of your sense of timing than a lot of the intentionally flashy dolly shit that I was doing at the time. Because it takes a lot of actual talent to do it. And I'm not trying to like, make you feel good. This is the truth. Like I actually tried to do those zooms. Abe can testify. Like there was a lot of shoots we did at Cracked where I was trying to actually do those comedy zooms, and it is, you can get better at it, but it's a natural talent. That's a thing I know for sure because I've done it. It's a natural talent.
That's kind of what I love about Raimi is that you can identify his pure ability of like a good insert. And how like
and it's funny.
Do we whip into insert or
Yeah.
do we just cut to an insert? His natural talent is definitely in those inserts. He's playing games all the time.
He's so good
and I couldn't
at them.
list them all because like I mean if we could roll tape on this podcast and go like, look here, there's one example, here's another example, but it would be monotonous to kind of go through right now. But just like I feel that he does that all the time.
His inserts are, I think, in some ways, the place you get the most sense of who he is as a filmmaker. Like I actually, you just mentioned a while back this like tracking shot, that we have. Like in a way, it's what he really does is give us 4 inserts. You know what I mean? Like there's really 4 inserts there.
It's a compound shot, yeah.
And they're all kind of funny. Like they all have
they're weird. They're
this comedy
they
value.
Are funny. It's like, what's that?
Yeah.
What's that?
Yes. Yes.
It's like a very Hunter S. Thompson kind of motivated camera angle.
Yes. It's like the camera's sort of like a grumpy inquisitor.
Like,
I totally agree. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Constantly in a state of surprise and hatred of the thing that he's looking at. Yeah.
Alarm at it. Yes, it's alarm.
The fuck is this?
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm glad you responded to that, because I think that that's one of the bread and butter of Raimi. There's a third sequence I want to point out.
Sure.
In Drag Me, which is the grave sequence, where Christine tries to re-gift Ganush the button. So it's namely when the rain starts soaking the earth, so Christine finds herself stuck in the grave, and a large iron cross knocks her out, and we have a kind of lingering, slow dolly out, and we kind of have time to wonder if Christine was going to, is she drowning? Or is what's going to happen? Or if she's going to resurface, which, of course she does. But it kind of takes us time, and we kind of just, in that time, you have that moment to kind of just meditate on the raindrops kind of thing. That's how much time he gives you. Mm-hmm. So it's next to the quick cutting, especially because relative is everything in film. So the quick cutting it's probably not even as long as I'm making it, but the quick cutting of the sequence that comes before, this shot makes it feel like it's an eternity. And it's a tactic he uses all the time. And we're going to talk about, some influences and references a little bit. But for here, I think this is a reference. If it's not a reference of a particular shot, it's a reference of an energy. And I'm going to go back to the source. As far as I'm aware, and I think this is out of, the mouth of Spielberg. David Lean is the first person who actually did this in Lawrence of Arabia. I've talked about this a lot. Talk about it when I talk about Mummy. Talk about it when I talk about Spielberg. There's a shot of a motorcycle goggles dangling from a tree at the very end of Lawrence of Arabia, swinging gently in the wind. And we just know feet away, the cliff ends, and there's been a horrible crash, and, he's dead. In Jaws, which is literally where Spielberg says he was quoting David Lean, we see at the beginning of the opening sequence where Jaws, I call Jaws like he's the name of the shark. We see the shark have killed, a woman who's just taken a dip. And we see a buoy bob to and fro, drifting slightly, implying what we saw just seconds before, in complete world of violence beneath the waves. These shots demand that we focus on kind of a natural, indifferent silence to that brutality.
Yeah.
It's this kind of nice little
meditative moment.
And I think that's a reference for him. I think that's a reference for a lot of filmmakers. I think in Evil Dead 2, if you remember, when he literally cuts his hand off, or is it when he cuts the face of his girlfriend in the vice? I can't remember. I think it's in the shed, and the blood splatters against a light bulb as it's bobbing to and fro, much like the buoy in Jaws. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
Those shots.
Yeah, it's a meditative shot. It's a shot where it's the violence happened, and then now consider what it means very briefly.
Yeah. Another reference in this movie is gotta be Nosferatu. In this case, the CG shadows that Raimi uses to reach out and grab you. Because Nosferatu does a lot of shadow work. And I think that was actually quite effective in this film. I thought the CG shadows were kind of cool because he does them more than once. He does them as a shadow, like you see the goat Lamia figure outside the windows. At one point, comes up to the door, and out of the shadow of the hooves come two hands that reach out and grab for Christine. I think that's kind of cool. And I think that's an update of that kind of trope as well. So he's pulling from tropes. Maybe it's not a reference to a particular shot, but it's once again, Raimi's not about shots. Raimi's about tactics. And Raimi's style will always be a part of the horror genre. I think that to switch gears to kind of more influences, or not influences, but other people's influences by him. Shaun of the Dead, Cabin in the Woods, Tucker versus Dale. These are all things that would not exist if Evil Dead wasn't made, right?
Yeah. Go ahead.
There's a note on Edgar Wright, too. He was actually approached by Raimi to direct this film. But Edgar Wright had a great quote, which is, "If I did it, it would just feel like karaoke." And I think that is super good thing to say.
It is.
By
I
Edgar
think
Wright.
they're both right. I think Raimi was also right to approach him for that. Like
I think so.
Like I think they both could have made this film, and they both would have been good films. But I do think Edgar Wright would have been trying to be Raimi.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree.
And when I think of Raimi's influence on the medium, specifically the genre, I guess I should say, it's not just blending horror and comedy. It's also his approach to updating the available tropes of just the straight horrors of the days when he was growing up watching these like slasher films and such, because it uses like wide angles during moments of attack, like way too close to the subject is another thing to make it off-putting and kind of distort. He uses things like the Raimi board footage and speeding up to kind of add his own taste or style to it, but like all these things, the violence of things going in the mouth, all the flash that we talk about that's like so signature Raimi. Like any good genre filmmaker, I think while it's unique in its framing, sound design, or effects or whatever, ultimately he's using in his toolbox to get us there. It's a trope. Its existence is contingent on the past versions of horror. So I think that there's something to be said about Raimi being able to both make you feel like, oh, this is like a horror film, but also take in the world that horror film exists, kind of push new ground. And I think that frontiersman spirit, which gives us things like the Raimi board and gives us things like, speeding up footage for no reason other than to look, kind of overtly mechanical.
I think
that's his addition to the genre.
I mean, I think also that like Raimi understood movie audiences a little better than traditional horror film makers did. I think that Raimi his sensibility is to horror what Spielberg's is to like action adventure stuff, where it's like it's like Spielberg's action adventure sensibility is basically this is how America felt about movies for 20 years. Right? Like he just made movies that were America loves this, right? And I think Raimi's sensibility about horror and specifically horror comedy is like, this is what people who like horror movies feel about movies. I don't even think that he made the most quintessential horror movies at all, but I just think he's spot on about how do people want to consume their horror movies. How many fucking parody horror
eyes
movies
on the prize? Yeah.
How many horror parody like if you go on Netflix right now, half the horror movies are going to be some dumb, sexy parody send up of a horror movie, right? And all of that is Raimi, right? Not exclusively, but he's really popular.
But he opened up the floodgates to be like horror, but also
fun and playful and sure, there'll be gross outs and scares, but also, a boob or two and maybe just a couple of yucks, who knows?
Yeah. And then as things developed, he was like, okay, let's focus on, I think that's why Drag Me to Hell, even if I enjoy like The Quick and the Dead or something like that more as a viewing, I think it really is his most polished film.
It's very restrained for him in some ways.
Yeah, I think he hit a good balance, in my opinion.
I agree. I think it's anyway. I don't want to detract because I know you want to talk about some more things, but
I just wanted to conclude.
Sure, go for it.
And I thought it would be a fun way to do this. Kind of soundbite to really quickly go through what I basically just said, but itemize it real quickly and put it in the framing device of, so you want to make a Raimi. So if you're a filmmaker who wants to I'm going to do a Raimi parody, here is 7 things to do. Put on an 18 to 25 millimeter lens for inserts in some of your close-ups. Shoot close-up action and emphasize claustrophobic framing when the two parties are facing off. They should occupy each other's frame, and the frame has little else in it. The main difference between suspense and surprise is editing. So before the reveal, cut between the two subjects and nothing else. After the surprise and the reveal or whatnot, do the same thing, but faster. You'll need to start to plant and pay off seconds later in order to develop this sequence. So use pan and tilts quickly to reveal what your protagonist is thinking. Often you'll need to block movement inside the scene. Traditional methods are fine, but it's good to include a high and wide angle, usually in the ceiling to show off the space at least once, especially if that space is claustrophobic. Reveals are done basically one way, the tilt pan. Use both static tripod shots that quickly pan or Dutch to reveal new geography or a new, character or someone behind the monster or whatever. But make sure that your monster and demon inhabits and comes along with inhabits that space, and it comes along with a typical horror string or abrupt musical cue. And if you want to show your protagonist is thinking, do the following move in one shot: move the camera, crane or dolly, or use a Raimi cam if you have a small budget, and show the series of inserts that way, and then cut it up later in post. Also, shoot it slow, speed it up.
Unbelievable.
Post. And then last, obligatory insert of some unrelated object, usually with some minimal motion or the, quote, feeling of stillness to counter the violence. And you just made a horror sequence a la Raimi. That's it for me.
That's great. So good. Can I? So I don't want to pull every single thread of what you said apart, but I do want to say one thing, just one tiny little thing. Sam Raimi also made A Simple Plan.
I know.
A Simple Plan is an exquisite film that is incredibly restrained, and that's actually my favorite of all the things he's made.
I think it's a good film.
I think it's fucking great.
It's also
like not a Raimi film.
It's not. I mean, I hate this because next episode you're going to hear me literally say like one of my favorite things about David Lynch is when he does shit like Elephant Man. But it's not Raimi. It's because I understand Raimi, I feel, and I like what I know what he's good for. I know what he's good at, and I want to see it. So it's kind of like play your hits. And we're all kind of darting around the reality, which is that movie's a Coen Brothers movie. He's basically like, what if Fargo was really good. Could I make Fargo?
It's still fucking good.
It's still fucking good. So I'll give you that.
And I actually forgot that it was a Sam Raimi movie. And for some reason, while you were talking, I looked it up because I was like, wait a minute, did he direct that movie? And then he did.
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah, it's good.
I agree that it is the alt Sam Raimi movie, but I think I'm going to argue it does matter in his canon because it's sort of a proof text for the fact that like he actually does have a lot of complexity to him as a filmmaker. Like this gleeful stuff is what he wants to do, but he can do other stuff that's a little bit more sort of adult, and muted.
See, I don't think all of what I said, the takeaway is that he's simplistic.
No, I mean emotionally complicated. I mean emotionally complicated.
Okay.
I think Simple Plan is shot less complicated than this movie is.
Yeah.
I mean, like, A Simple Plan is also a parable, incidentally, but like it's a more emotionally complicated and in some ways more tense experience than most Raimi stuff is. But it's the anti-Raimi, right? Like it's that movie that sort of establishes the other edge of the spectrum that he can do.
Right.
And I mean, like, I think a lot of the great filmmakers have that movie. Like, again, Lynch has a straight story, which is just a regular narrative, and it's very good. It's a very good narrative film. Spielberg has several movies that it sort of counterbalance his like ballast and sort of epic melodrama. The one that pops to mind right off the bat is Schindler's List, but there's others, right, that are sort of less bombastic and sort of epic action movie-ish, And there's a lot. This is a thing for like big filmmakers to like have this other movie that they do.
You gotta spread your wings, I'm not. Yeah.
Simple Plan is a movie I think that's what
this
wish I could put my name on. I love that movie. I think it's very good.
No, it rips. It's just it's not, and it's for educational purposes. It's not what Raimi is known for. It's not what makes Raimi unique.
Right.
It just makes him a good director.
Right.
which I think can be said, and I stand by that.
Yeah, I think he's a good director. I mean, I don't think I'm not putting a sensitive drama in his hands for the most part. You know what I mean? Like you know what I mean? I'm not doing that. That's not who he.
Except for that one time.
Except for that one time, right? I'm not putting one in Tarantino's hands either. You know,
right?
And that's fine.
God, could you imagine Tarantino doing a fucking actual genre movie, like a straight story? He couldn't do it.
Well, see,
he couldn't do it.
I don't know what.
He'd have to do other stuff.
Imagine if he made. I mean, just
like imagine he made TV, like it just popped in for a quick Star Trek.
He could do a Star Trek, I think.
Oh, he's gonna
because he would restrain himself.
You know that, right?
He would do one Star Trek. I just don't think he could do like I'm just not interested in seeing him do. I don't know anything Spike Jonze has done. You know, I don't know. Just most movies.
You know, hold on. I just want to double check. You know this because it's possible you don't. Tarantino is doing a Star Trek. You know that, right?
An episode of Star Trek or a Star Trek movie?
He's doing a Star Trek movie.
Well, I'm not instantly opposed to that.
It's based on an episode of the classic Star Trek OG series that takes place largely earthbound in a 1930s gangster setting.
Oh.
Yeah, he's gonna do.
That's a weird movie.
Star Trek.
But he has done some one-off movies from time to time. Like he does kind of veer off and do these weird little like cult classic, like that double feature movie that he did, right?
Well,
Grindhouse.
All of what he does is cult classic. What are you talking about? He's entirely cult based.
No, Tarantino. At this point, Tarantino's is a pop culture icon. Every movie he does is a major deal.
What is he popular for? He's being the cult guy.
Yes, but it's like, how long can you call it cult when he's never made a movie that was only a cult movie?
Yeah, it's a good point because those terms are just kind of evaluated on
they're based on 80 genres that don't exist anymore.
When I guess what I mean when I say cult then, which is the improper word, but what I mean to say is like he's going for his films have that mystique. They have the Tarantino. They're all emphatically Tarantino.
Yeah, they're all his vibe.
He's never not in. All I wish to say is that he's never not emphatically Tarantino.
Yeah, we haven't seen we have not seen his simple plan. I don't know. Exactly. I don't know what his simple plan would be. Hey, maybe this Star Trek thing is good though. I know he respects that material. You know, like and Tarantino's not a shitty director.
He respects it. No, he's not. I just don't know if he respects any material other than his own.
Dude, he's pretty like.
Yeah, I should take that back. He loves films and all that. He in fact, sometimes it's to the extent of he's worshiping at the altar of, you know.
Yes.
You know,
we'll
plug
see.
in French New Wave director or, you know, Les Samurai or something like that, or The Searchers and John Ford. He's definitely got all those tropes available. And he's playing with them. He's doing interesting stuff. I just mean to say that, like, he's got to put his spin on it. He's got to put that Tarantino stamp.
Yeah, right. He's gonna load it up. That's gonna be a loaded pitch for sure. Load it up with Tarantino. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm sure we'll see a couple of ridiculous zooms and some hilariously posed Star Trek team shots and stuff. I'm sure, right?
I think it's more in the writing, to be frank, but that's fine.
What do you think?
Like, I think the Tarantino stank is more in the writing.
I think he has a few tropes as a director that, like, we always forget, but he definitely fucking does them.
Like feet?
Well, duh, that's the big one, right? But there's also, there's also like needlessly long takes and sort of like,
true.
Like he does a lot of like posed shots that are almost Wes Anderson, but they're nowhere near as like clever.
Often quotes those.
That's true. He does quote stuff.
He poses for like. And guess what? You didn't know that's High Noon, you know? But that's not I don't have a problem with that, you know?
Yeah.
As they say, good writing is good stealing or whatever the fucking quote is.
I'm just bummed that he's never made anything since Pulp Fiction that like truly felt like this is just a story I wanted to tell. You know, like he just hasn't done that. Like it feels like every project he's done since then has been about the surrounding circumstances to the movie. Like whether it's like I'm finally making my anime film, or I'm finally making my, you know, kung fu movie, or I'm finally making my Holocaust revenge story or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, instead of
Yeah,
like,
it seems like the topic is a set piece of its own for him.
yeah, or the setting, as in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, right?
Yeah.
Like, whereas Pulp Fiction wasn't about any of that to me. Like, I watched that, I'm like, this guy actually wanted to tell this story.
Yeah, I mean, it is LA, like it is these things, but it's like not saying loudly, hey, this is like a period piece or something like that.
Yeah.
Even though it probably is. I mean, he probably imagined it. I don't even remember when Pulp Fiction's supposed to take place, if it's current modern retelling or it's supposed to take place slightly in the past. I think it's contemporary, but someone will point it out.
Somebody will.
But the point is, it's not the emphasis. That's why we don't remember. We don't recall.
True.
It.
So, can I tell you, I didn't like Drag Me to Hell. I did not like it.
Yeah, I don't think you like horror films. I know you don't really like horror films.
I like about half, or maybe less.
What are some of your
I loved
films
Scream.
that you like?
I loved It Follows. I love The Shining. I kind of liked It a fair bit.
That's interesting.
There's more that I can't think of. I love The Witch. I do like psychological thrillers better as a genre. Yeah,
I was going to say almost all of the ones that you mentioned are more psychological as opposed to emphasizing like the like I can't you don't give a shit about Friday the 13th, do you?
No, I don't. I mean, I care about it because I love Dave. I don't
Tom. Really either. Yeah, I don't really either. Like, I don't fuck with the nightmares.
Nah.
I understand how important. I feel like they built a thing that's amazing, and they weren't there to see it become amazing. Like the Wes Cravens of the world. It's like, yeah, you're not good, but you had ideas that made everyone go, "Oh shit, you can make a movie like that," and you were first.
I think Wes Craven is extremely creative, and I think John Carpenter is extremely creative and also a really talented like filmmaker. Like, he knows how to tell a story and also like how to get the most out of camera stuff. Like, he's very practical.
Got to give it up for JC.
Yeah, he's great. Like, I don't love his movies because I don't really like those kinds of movies. Like, The Thing is okay to me. I'm not a Thing guy. It's fine. Yeah, it's fine. I prefer psychological stuff.
We can still be friends. Like, I'm still friends with flawed people.
Thank you. I appreciate that. No, but this leads me to. So I want to tell you why I didn't like Drag Me to Hell, and I think it's going to surprise you.
Pour it on me.
It's because I did not feel like this woman deserved what happened to her. Mm-hmm. That really fucking bothered me.
Yeah.
I know that it made Sam Raimi feel a little meaner than I think he is. Mm-hmm. Like, for instance, she kills a kitten, and it's like, why?
Yeah.
Sacrifice.
To live.
Right, but like, I don't know. She didn't spend a lot of time problem solving that. I'll just put it to you that way. And the other thing...
No, I mean, yeah, she could have gotten another cat.
I mean, or just like, I don't know, fucking something else. She could have gone to the store and got a mouse that nobody cares about.
You're murdering something. It doesn't matter what you murder.
Well, what is your kitten?
Still a murderer.
Come on. Anyway, so, fine.
You're still a murderer. I'm
Buy
not saying it's like there's a better way.
And get it done.
There's not a better way to murder.
I agree.
But I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying about how it's like it seems unjust.
But yeah, it's just I want to do 1 minute on this and then I'll move on. I swear to God. So like,
hit me.
So look, this woman. This. By the way, I don't think gypsy is an ethnic slur. I don't think it is. If it is, I apologize.
I think it's sometimes used that way.
I think it can be used. I think when you're describing the behavior of like swindling somebody as gypsy or gypped or something, that's not acceptable. But I think the term is just an ethnic group of people. I could be wrong. And I'm sorry if I am. Please forgive me, audience. So this gypsy woman, she is completely unreasonable from the jump. And I think we're supposed to believe that Christine's desire to be assistant manager at a bank is greedy. And like, it's not. that's a completely fucking reasonable goal for her. Being assistant manager at a bank is not like, I want to be president and oppress people. You know what I mean? Or like, I want to be rich. It's like, I just want to succeed in my job because I need to. Like it's not a lofty goal that's sort of like out of reach and she's squashing people to get there. Like, that's not the vibe I get. And this woman who shows up is completely fucking unreasonable, like 100%. Like, the touching and everything that she does is like aggressive and manipulative. And Christine basically just makes a hard call. And the rest of the movie, it's like, yeah, man, you should have done that. And then at the end, and this is why it bothered me the most, I was okay with it until the end. She's like, yeah, I really could have given it to her. You know what I mean? And that's when she gets dragged to hell. And I'm like, no, you couldn't have. Like, this is like, she didn't have the money. And clearly she's got 1 billion family members. What the fuck are we talking about here? You know, like,
I mean, 100% right. I think that is all intended.
Yeah, I liked your interpretation of the movie, although I think that I think it takes a pretty smart movie watcher to get that. Like, I think the average moviegoer just sort of thinks like shrug about the motivations of the characters.
I don't know. I think most people can suss out that you don't have to be ambition incarnate in order for your sin in a single moment to be ambition.
But it's not played, and maybe this is my critique of the directing. It's played in a...
You don't think it's a sin?
I don't think it's played like one. I think it's played like... I mean, I know the movie later says it is, but like, so I'm not disputing that the movie at some point says that it is that. I'm disputing the way that it's done in the scene is so... This woman is so aggressive and wacky that it feels completely justified.
That's why I think the theme is justice, because it's a malformed form of justice. There's justice on one side and there's justice on another side, and then there's the audience's justice, what we think is like the premier justice.
Right, and so you're like, and what you mean by justice is kind of like this like cruel fate, where like, but what you mean in this case, that's what you mean.
Giving each their due.
Right, except, I mean, I guess she's due that...
And how you define due is the difference. That's what makes justice not codified.
This is,
right?
I don't know, the way you're saying it is like unspooling more things I want to ask, but I don't want to go on forever about this. And I don't want to like get into another philosophical religion.
I want to understand.
Chat. I don't want to do that.
I apologize for keep interrupting or whatever, or like throwing us.
No, it's okay.
Different areas.
I'm not sure if it's a critique of Raimi or if it's just like you and I are on opposite ends of a divide here.
I think here's my main thing.
Yeah.
I think it's like, forget all what I said and just, I think it is intentional, because I think he wants that frustration to be in your mind, like, because then it can happen to you, because then you're like, what? No, I'm not crazy here, right? So that's, I think he's using it to an effect. Maybe it's not right. Maybe it makes us mad. But ultimately, when we're watching it, we're like, oh, don't. You know, we have a visceral reaction to time and time again, she keeps getting fucked over. And it's just like, it's all in time with what he's doing. He's giving us these loopholes. He's giving us, all right, you can sacrifice a cat, or you can do all these things to get out of the actual, like, damning. But time and time again, he dangles it in front of us, and we're just trying to, like, please just give her an out, man, because at this point it's not, we all started and it was unjustified. That's what he's talking about. He's like, yeah, sometimes horror is, there is no justice,
right? And that's unusual
or you feel there's no
that's
justice.
Unusual for horror films, because most of them are definitely like how do I describe, like, based around a kind of Catholic understanding of sin. You know what I mean? Like you do something wrong, and the universe, or maybe even just like a karmic
I
idea.
didn't even think about that. Yeah, this is very not.
This is not this
flattering.
Right. This is a little bit more like the Grecian myths that inspired it, which is sort of like, look, it's not that you did anything wrong. It's just you got a curse on you, man.
It's kind of Old Testament.
See, I don't agree with that interpretation of the Old Testament, but I would say it's like old Greek myths, where it's like, Oedipus didn't do anything wrong that he had this doom laid on him, right? But like, he still got the doom on him. Like, it's fatalistic.
Yeah. I mean, like, we should all be allowed to fuck our moms. you know, we accidentally killed our dads. That's not wrong.
Well,
but we did want it.
but it I mean,
yeah, no, because Oedipus is actually a really great example because he doesn't. It's like comedy of errors. It's like noises off the tragedy because it's just one thing happens another. He's like, oh fuck, I got hoodwinked again.
But like it doesn't start notably, as far as I remember, it does not start with Oedipus like cheating a fairy or something or belittling a witch.
Right. It's not
it doesn't start with you did this shitty thing, now you're a beast for 20 years until a woman falls in love with you, which is forever. Either way. You know what I mean?
Classical and neoclassical kind of justice.
Right.
Like the bad guy who's like morally corrupt is also the ugly guy who's like, oh, it's like there's these tropes that come out of just an undeniable, infallible system of justice.
It's like most movies with a gypsy curse in them are basically like Drag Me to Hell or Thinner, right? Where like the curse is like, no matter what you do, you did something wrong, you pissed off the wrong person, and so you're going to pay for it. You're going to run away from it. But like, unless you fix things with this gypsy somehow, this curse is going to play itself out. And then even if you do, you're probably going to suffer anyway. Because there's always a twist. Every time, it feels like most gypsy movies, there's a twist at the end. Which happened here, right? Like, so
yeah.
Do you think maybe I got confused by this? Does the button actually matter?
Yeah.
Does the button actually matter? Because like in the end,
it's the ritualistic center stone, of the right.
In the end, it's the boyfriend that has the button. Why doesn't he go to hell?
He was not gifted. He's just carrying.
So the curse rules. I got you. So
the curse rule is that's the writ that they're over. Yeah, you got it.
Okay, so the unfortunate thing is, I actually had to copy "Drag Me to Hell" for that short film that we made a few years back for Cracked. Which is why I saw the ending to this, because Soren and the script
said like Drag Me to Hell,
and I was like, okay, well, I better
demons.
see what that is. And then I watched, I was like, oh, that's great. Yeah, we should do that. And then we did, a cheaper version of that, which is a bummer, because that would have been a very satisfying experience had I not known.
Yeah, I love how it's got multiple shots, and I love how her face is slowly turning into a skeleton.
Yeah, it's really cruel.
Yeah.
I felt really cruel. Bad for her when I was like, oh no.
That's slasher films, though, man. They're all cruel.
But see, again, in most slasher films...
And this isn't a slasher, but it comes out of that.
Right, it comes out of that genre. In most slasher films, Nev Campbell gets away at the end. Like, yeah, maybe you kill Rose McGowan's character, right? Who's like maybe a little shitty, but she didn't deserve to die.
That's true. There's a protagonist that survives.
And Sydney gets away, right? In this movie, no matter what Sydney does, she's fucked. And that's just a different viewpoint to a horror movie.
Because I mean, it's like if we just chose our protagonist to be like Kevin Bacon in Friday the 13th, it's like just because for everyone else involved, like as Jason or Michael Myers is running around, there's no justice to the death. Like they usually fuck, and then it's like horror rules, as Scream pointed out. But it's just, what if your protagonist wasn't, Jamie Lee Curtis,
Right.
Wasn't Nev Campbell. That's all it's doing, right? But it does make you feel like it's unjust. That's, I think, the point.
Well, I think all myths about fate are fundamentally about contemplating justice and how it diverges from fate. I mean, everyone I can think of is fundamentally about that. Anyway, I didn't want to diverge too much. I love this presentation about Sam Raimi. What a great filmmaker. And this is a very good film to talk about. You did great, man. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. Hey, you're welcome, buddy. Also, R.I.P. Sean Connery.
Oh, yeah, that happened today.
I know. Sean Connery, man.
James Bond.
Well, I didn't care that much about that. Just like, he was just a guy. You know what I mean? Like, he's just one of those guys. You know?
You should say his eulogy.
Welcome to the Rock, you know?
God. We got to watch
We
The
do
Rock
need to watch
now.
The Rock now. I mean, like,
You must not
Sean
hesitate.
Connery, by the time we got to him, you know what I mean? After he'd been, by the time we got to him, was famous just for being Sean Connery.
The world had already had it. The world had had its fun with Sean Connery before we got to him.
By our era, he was already famous just for being Sean Connery. You know, like, that's a big name. I mean, I know he's been out of the limelight for a pretty long time, but that's a big name. So,
huge name.
Anyway, R.I.P.
Yeah. So R.I.P.
Yeah, R.I.P. And also, those of you who are listening, if you haven't voted, what are you doing? Get your ass out there and vote.
It's literally tomorrow.
Get out there and vote, dude. Don't fuck around with this. Just get out there and vote.
Like if you're listening to this on the day of release,
you need to go. You need to go in person. By the way, don't mail it now. Go in person.
You can't even mail it. Yeah.
Go in person if you have not voted, and vote in your election and be an American. And
and I know, I just have to say it officially, you know, as a part of the podcast. Everyone keeps saying it, but don't vote. Don't write in me. Don't when you vote. Don't vote for Abe Epperson.
Get out of here.
Everyone keeps saying it in the comments. They're like, vote Abe 2020, and I'm like, don't throw your vote away like that, everyone. So I just needed to officially say
you're
it.
really afraid that you're going to be the tipping point state. Abe Epperson is the tipping point.
I could steal some votes, some crucial votes, and some swing states.
California is right on the edge, so yeah, you could be a real problem child.
God, you know what? People like 2 days after this and forever are going to know the result and be listening to us who don't know the result of the election. That makes this terrifying.
I didn't want to bring up the truly scary things before we were about to sign off, and the election is...
That's the horror,
dude,
true horror.
Who knows what 1 week from now our world's going to be like? Who knows? It's a complete mystery, and every situation seems plausible, honestly. So, you know, Good luck. Good luck, every one of you. Be wise, be smart, take care of yourselves.
Drag me to hell.
We might have to.
This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The Beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the small beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you!